to everybody. It's lovely to see you here. Who knew Albie Bain? My co-pilot here, she's not AI, but she's co-pilot, did as a small child, and she has memories. But you didn't, nobody knew her? Good, I can say skull and stuff. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You know, when you know somebody, or you knew somebody, when you think of them, you conjure up a vision of them in front of you. You can actually see them in the flesh. Yes? And when I do that, yes, exactly. When I do that, I have this vision of Sister Mary Alberta Spain, a fairly short figure, taller than me, but everyone's taller than me, a little short figure, but fairly this way, and always in the early days wore the white habit of the Benedictine order, so that she had the great headgear, she had the billowing vestments that went to the foot, and she swept around. She got about, she pushed her body in every direction, and she was terrifying, especially to little kids, of course, because she swept into the classrooms, because she taught at the Dominican convent in Dongra. She taught, I don't know about all ages. Jenny, did she teach the little ones?
No, she didn't teach the little ones, just the older ones.
Right, the older ones whom she put up with very happily, and probably loved the smart ones very much, because she was on a wavelength with adults. She didn't like children. And she would sweep around the place, sort of running over these little kids, you know. It was all a bit like
face
that.
like thunder.
Anyway, this is the woman. I found her totally different, and I came upon her as an adult, of course, and as someone within her ken, because I was researching for a family history book at the time. She was researching for ancient landmarks. As you well know, here we are. And she was all over the country. I was just chasing a family, but we had very much a common denominator. We told each other our bits and pieces. And we, if she had juicy stuff to tell me, she couldn't wait to tell me. But she told me stuff about things I wanted to know, and dear God, I hope I was able to reciprocate a little bit. She was known as Sister Mary Alberta Spain, of course. She called herself Albertus, always, in referring to herself, which I thought was rather cute. But everybody else called her Albie. So she, you know, she rolled along on these things. And her speech, for all it may have been in the classroom, I would not know. But speaking to me, she had the softest voice you would ever have. Softest, she almost breathy. Especially when she was telling you something rather juicy, it got very breathy. She was lovely, but she had this soft New Zealand, she was a New Zealander. She had this soft New Zealand sort of tone and accent that she never lost. And it was a delight to listen to her. I just thought it was gorgeous. Anyway, in teaching her English and economics, she did all that, but it was obviously not specifically a labour of love. What was a labour of love, of course, was researching and writing a history of the Victoria district when she thought of this wonderful thing to do. What started her thinking about it, Bruce?
The Mother Superior wanted to know about, the Bishop of Geraldton was saying he had control over the Dominicans. And the Mother Superior was rejecting it. And so she asked Albertus to do some research on that.
Well, there you go. Boy, did it. It was like an octopus. It went... Oh, thank you very much. Am I throwing things everywhere? It went out there, incredibly so, to bring this book up. And she took her time, of course, to do it, because how she found time to leave the convent and the teaching and the prayers and the whatever you do, and goes charging around the country talking to every Tom, Dick and Harry, and spending hours in the Batty Library in Perth, hours in Geraldton, with the help of people like Kit Ellery and co in Dongra, who assisted her where they could. I do not know, but she did it. And between all that, if she wasn't talking to me when I saw her, she was writing me copious letters. So she found the time to do that too. She'd scribble off 3 pages of close written stuff about what had been happening. It just fell out of the woman. It was fantastic. It really was. She came to stay with me once. I was on a property out of Menanue. And I said, would you come for the weekend? Yes. And she obviously had dispensation to come for the weekend. The Benedictines must have been quite relaxed. I don't know. I never asked her very many things. I never asked her about her teaching career. I never asked her about her personal life, although I did stay with her family in New Zealand very briefly much later on. But I never asked her about her youth, her childhood. Never asked her about anything except her research. And that kept us going flat out whenever we saw each other. We had too much to say. However, she came to visit. And the property had a very imposing homestead on it at the time. And so I drew up at the front door, as you did, this great big gilded front door. And then it led into a very, very wide, super wide, very long passage in the old-fashioned way with rooms down each side. 3/4 of the way down the passage were 2 baize covered swinging pushy doors, which were cutting off the servants' quarters, like the kitchens and the whatever down there. So I opened the door and Albie sweeps in her usual tornado manner and all this white billowing stuff. And down the end, the doors are half open and there's 4 or 5 or 6 heads, one above the other, going, oh! They had never seen a nun before. I was not Catholic. I never told them about anything. I just probably said, Sister Mary Alberta is coming to stay. No one took any notice of me. Kids don't. They were busy. It was holiday time. And they were doing something else. So when this apparition appeared at the front door, it was all too much. They vanished. Well, they all had to front up again for meals eventually, and the introductions were made, and she was fine. It had all worked, but she didn't spend time with them. She spent the weekend with me, laughing and talking as we always did. We laughed constantly. We found fun in everything we said. The more scurrilous, the better, of course. But in everything we were chasing, she adored it, and she made it sound the most fun thing in the world to go and research. All the old people she could find, and then all the records she could get her hands on, to look for things. It was a breeze. So that enthusiasm just poured out of her. Whether it poured out of her at the convent, I have no way of knowing. But she certainly didn't. I wanted all. It was gorgeous. And we talked letters. We wrote letters, and we talked through the years of researching ancient landmarks. And then the time came to publish it. Now, the church didn't enter the foray, from what I can always see. The church, having given her a few ideas and allowed her to do this, backed off the financial stuff. The shires were all approached, the shires in the Victoria district were approached, and to a man, a couple said, well, perhaps in the next financial year or the one after that. Most of them said no. There was no interest in history particularly, as there may be now, which we're trying to foster flat out. People were perhaps too close to it in their mind still, because great-grandfather had been one of the early people. I don't know. And a woman writing history was not heard of. They can't do it. They're at the stove. They're having kids. What are they doing? And she was a nun at foot. They're praying. They're not writing history about people. So nobody could get it in their head that this book was worth publishing. Nobody had a bullfoot realisation of what it contained, I don't think, because of course you don't if you're not following someone. It went down to University of WA Press, and a couple of good professors down there. One was helpful and fine, but unfortunately the one that took it in charge was a crusty old soul, whom I never did like, ever, before or after. And he took it in hand and read it through, of course, and said, right, now you take out all the personal stuff, all the gorgeous chatty bits and pieces that she'd put into it of human life. It was a good third of the book. So she went home and she took it out. He said, you can't publish any more than that, and as it is, it's quite a big, heavy book. But he said it's got to be hardcover, it's got to be in big print so that old people can read it. He obviously thought no young people would ever be bothered doing it. It was a wild take on history of the day. He was a very eminent professor. He was one of the top dogs at UWA. However, he said it's got to be in the big print, therefore it can only be that many words. So it came through, and they jiggled and they diddled, and the money still had to be filled. I mean, University Press wasn't paying for it. So, but he felt he could dictate in the academic manner. He knew what he thought had to be done, and he dictated. Well, eventually it got published. It was fantastic, and Albie got over all that because she fought very hard for it. Then she comes to me after a while, much chat and carry on, and she says, I think I'm going to write a book on pearling. Huh? Pearling? Says I, pearling? And as Bruce explained to me the other day in his research, she went off with the thought of carrying this history up through the Pilbara and to Kimberley. That's a very tall order. And as she thought more about it or got into it, she realised it was too much of a tall order. But in the process, she picked up some information on pearling, which of course in Broome was huge, as we know, and down towards Shark Bay and wherever. But it started in Queensland. So off she goes with more dispensation from the Benedictines to Southeast Asia. And without getting excited, she went here and went there and went somewhere and learned a lot about the beginnings of, or the whole thing of pearling and the people who came to Australia to do just that. And she started in Queensland, she went through the Territory, ended up in Broome with a bit of Shark Bay, and wrote a smasho book. And I really encourage you to read it. Full Fathom 5. It's a ripper. Because I don't know what happened there. Oh yes, I do know what happened. The professor at UWA didn't get his hands on it. So it's a little bit more sort of human, as well as being very historical and very factual. She scouted around. She went to UWA, and the same process was going to happen. So she now knew a few more things about things, and she decided to look elsewhere. And she found I would call them a private company called Art Look, who were going at the time with Helen Weller and John Harper Nelson. Who was in radio, John Harper Nelson? Terrible piece of goods, but never mind, they went together and they had a publishing thing. Well, I didn't like it anyway. So they took one, no, I think she said, they said, no, well maybe, in 2 years' time we can look at it, we're pretty snowed under, the usual talk. And then one of them read it, and they rang her the next day and said, we're doing it now. It's a good book. So they put it out, and it happened. And it went through the publishing system where apparently people paid for what they bought, and it was managed much better. So that was good. So she gets through that. And time, of course, is going on by now. Time is, getting on. So I might add, she wrote, her writing, as will be discussed a bit later, but I do mention that she wrote thematically. She didn't write in a chronological order of it starts back in thing and it progresses on. She took a subject and she chewed that to bits and then took another subject and put the chronological bit in each subject, but they weren't connected, if you understand me. Mm. So when all the hoi polloi, including me, around the Victoria district, read Ancient Landmarks, we went, can't read this. No idea what you're talking about. Never done this before. It was a bit new for a lot of us who weren't terribly into all this at the time. However, she got by, and that's how she operated. So we've got to pearling, and the pearling happened. That was good. She got through that, and she was definitely on a roll. She loved researching and writing. She couldn't stop. I don't know what happened to the teaching, whether she still continued to teach, because she moved down to the Law Street in Innaloo, Scarborough, which was the home base of the Dominicans, and she was there, and whether she taught there, see, I never asked her, I don't remember any of all this, it's absolutely useless. All I remember are her letters and her comments and what she said. So Geraldton pops up now. Geraldton's sort of had a few more thinks, and it's probably 20 years on from now. And life's starting to change. People starting to look at their history a little bit. Things went on. So the long and short of it was that the Geraldton Council asked if she would write a book on Geraldton. Oh yes, no problem, says Albie. And once she goes in and knowing far more where to look, I'm quite sure. And she was very good. And I've got a little quote here because during all that process of research and her copious letters, she said, I have permission from the Commissioner of Police to view top priority files on smuggling. The whole of Chapter 9, smuggling, I beg your pardon, smuggling and sly grog in the northern spheres. Juicy subject, she would love it. I have to cast out the whole of Chapter 9 unless I find just one sentence in writing on an official document that both were carried out. There are inferences, double-hinted dints, reading between the lines, acts of parliament, and legions, but not one line can prove that all of these things do tie up into one delightful story. How frustrating. She couldn't substantiate it. It was all hearsay or innuendo, whatever. Apparently, wheat and potatoes, separately or together, I know not, makes a delightful type of moonlight dew. She got all those bits together. And I did go and quickly look in A Life of Its Own, which is the Geraldton publication. I looked in the index. I didn't read it through. I looked in the index and I couldn't find any mention of smuggling. So obviously she couldn't write Chapter 9 and went into something else. Sadly. However, where's my bit of paper? Right up towards the end of her life, which we didn't know was going to be the end of her life at that stage, I don't know what age she was getting into, 70s perhaps by then, she wrote to me with great gusto and she said, I'm going to write a book about Governor Hampton. Oh, I say, still shocked by what she's choosing to do. George Hampton, I think, was his name, was he?
John
Hampton. Yes, he was one of the many governors that the colony had in the early days, and he was particularly rough on convicts. Why, I do not know, but anyway, he made their life hell, and his son as well. And she was onto this. She was going to give him beans, I think. She really was going to tie Governor Hampton up in knots. And I've got another little quote here floating around. Where's Hampton gone? Here he is. She's writing, went down to the Supreme Court's dungeon, because there is one under the Supreme Court in Perth, and had the ghosts of Bolitho Jones, who's Moonlight Joe, various murderers, etc., rapists and ex-highwaymen, running noiselessly around me. I haven't one bit of innocence left in me after seeing the list of crimes that those chaps were up for. And this is how she wrote. She just made up things, thought about things, gave another slant on things. It was absolutely gorgeous. So she was well into Hampton, and she passed away. And I was speaking with Bruce the other day and saying, what happened to Hampton, the manuscript of Hampton? Love to see it. I never did. What happened to the third of ancient landmarks? Very much love to see that. Surely it's somewhere. Surely she didn't burn it. Surely she gave it in and put it in a drawer. I think it's worth us. Bruce, you can do it. Have you considered? I don't know, but whatever.
The archives at the university? Where should
well, there's places to look, of course, and you would go first to the Order, and second to the university, and third to the Valley Library or something like that. I don't know. I mean, there are places that you assume it may end up if it was going to be kept.
Well, they're the ones that told her to take it out.
That's
So
when
they
they
already-
probably burn it.
They already had it, yeah.
See, I mean, this crusty old thing.
Well, I can't imagine
is a
the
grumble
Dominicans
bum.
burning it if she'd left it at the base in Perth, the Dominican base in Perth. I
Yeah,
can't
in the
imagine
Law
that they would
Strait.
have burnt
And
it.
if the good nuns felt it was worth still keeping, that's another thing. Anyway, I'm finished now. I'll finish. Can't grow anything. and Reedy would be much the same.